ukipenda kwa lugha ya Kimombo, National Anthem Lyrics. Mheshimiwa Rais, maneno ya wimbo wa taifa ya Jamhuri ya Kenya ina uzito ikiweza kutuweka mbele zake Mwenyezi Mungu na kuomba dua. Neno la kwanza, Mheshimiwa Rais, tukiweza kufahamu kwamba Mwenyezi Mungu ndiye mwenye nguvu zote na kuweka imani yetu kwake Mwenyezi Mungu aweze kuibariki na kuilinda Kenya. Pia inaweza kutueleza kwamba umoja wetu ndio nguzo yetu, tuweze kushikamana kila wakati tukiomba amani iweze kuwa katika taifa letu la Kenya na utulivu, uhuru wa kuweza kulinda taifa letu na hali kadhalika Kenya kuweza kustawi na maendeleo. Upendo na umoja wa taifa, uzalendo wa kujitolea kwa ajili ya Kenya. Na kwa ujumla, Mheshimiwa Rais, wimbo wa taifa unaonyesha uzalendo, umoja, amani, uhuru na matumaini ya Kenya kustawi. Maneno ya wimbo wa taifa. Shukran. Mheshimiwa Rais, takayofuata ni nembo ya taifa la Kenya. Mheshimiwa Rais, nembo ya taifa la Kenya ni alama rasmi inayoonyesha ujumbe wa umoja, ulinzi, uhuru na utambulisho wa taifa la Kenya. Kwenye nembo hii, Mheshimiwa Rais, utaweza kuona ngao. Ngao hii inaashiria ulinzi wa taifa letu la Kenya. Simba wawili, Mheshimiwa Rais, wakiashiria nguvu tulio nayo kulinda taifa letu, tukiwa na ujasiri na imara kama simba, ardhini, angani na hata kwenye fuo za bahari zetu. Mikuki miwili, Mheshimiwa Rais, unayoiona ni ya kulinda mipaka yetu na hali kadhalika taifa letu la Kenya. Jogoo inaashiria mamlaka na hali kadhalika mwanzo mpya, kama vile Mheshimiwa Rais, kila asubuhi jogoo anapowika, wasaa wa majogoo, alfajiri, wa Kenya huamka kujituma na kuanza kujenga taifa lao. Mimea unayoona, Mheshimiwa Rais, inaashiria kilimo na utajiri wa mali asili tulio nayo kama taifa la Kenya. Unavyotazama, Mheshimiwa Rais, tuna pareto, nanasi, mahindi miongoni mwa mimea tunayoipanda na mazao yanayopatikana katika taifa letu la Kenya. Neno harambee, Mheshimiwa Rais, linatukumbusha tushirikiane, tusaidiane kwa pamoja, tuwe na mshikamano mmoja kama wa Kenya. Nembo ya taifa la Kenya. Thank you. Mheshimiwa Rais, kuhitimisha tafrija hizi za kijeshi ni muhuri wa umma, the public seal, Republic of Kenya. Mgeni wetu rasmi, kwa sababu ya uzito wa muhuri huu, wanajeshi hawa wataenda kuuzindua upande ule wa pili na utaweza kutazama, na nitawaalika sote tuweze kuelekeza macho yetu kwenye runinga zetu na hali kadhalika walioko hapa mbele kuweza kutazama wanajeshi hawa wakizindua muhuri huu wa umma, katika lugha ya Kimombo, the public seal, Republic of Kenya. Muhuri wa umma wa Kenya ni alama rasmi, Mheshimiwa Rais, inayotumika kuthibitisha nyaraka rasmi za serikali na hali kadhalika inaashiria mamlaka ya serikali kuleta uhalali na uhalisia wa kuthibitisha kwamba hati hizi ni rasmi na hali kadhalika kuleta ukuu wa jamhuri yetu ya Kenya. Wakienda kuzindua rasmi hivi sasa muhuri huu wa umma. Mheshimiwa Rais, wakati wa kwanza mimi kujionea rasmi muhuri huu wa umma ni wakati ulipokuwa unapandisha mji wa Eldoret kuwa jiji na tukaweza kuona rasmi muhuri huu wa umma. Tuwapigie makofi mazuri tafadhali wanapohitimisha tafrija hizi za kijeshi. Kwa heshima tarudisha kwake Hops aweze kuendelea. Mheshimiwa Felix Kosgei. Thank you.
Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you may kindly take your seats. Your Excellency, the Constitution now installed before us opens with a preamble. This preamble is the soul upon which our constitutional order rests. In its words, the people of Kenya honor the generations whose struggle brought freedom and justice to our land, affirm the values by which we seek to live, and declare the nation we resolve to build. It is therefore befitting that these words should be voiced today by a new generation of Kenyans, the inheritors of the constitutional promise and the custodians of its future. Sir, permit me now to invite the 16 pupils selected to lead us in the recital of the preamble to the Constitution. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may we all kindly rise for the recital of the preamble to the Constitution set out on page 7 of the program. Page 7 of the program.
Good morning, Your Excellency, honorable gentlemen and women. Before you is Jamhuri High School and Pangani High School, presenting to you the recital of the preamble of the 2010 Constitution of Kenya. We, the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation, honoring those who heroically struggled to bring freedom and justice to our land, proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation, respectful of the environment, which is our heritage, and determined to sustain it for the benefit of future generations, committed to nurturing and protecting the well-being of the individual, the family, communities, and the nation. recognizing the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. Exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance of our country, and having participated fully in the making of this constitution, having adopted, enacted, and given this constitution to ourselves and to our future generations, and having promulgated it on the 27th day of August in the year of our Lord 2010, do hereby, on this 16th anniversary of its promulgation, reaffirm our commitment to respect, uphold, and defend this constitution for the glory of Kenya. God bless Kenya.
Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you may kindly take your seats. Thank you. Your Excellency, the aspirations proclaimed in the preamble are marked throughout the contours of our Constitution. Among its most consequential reforms were devolution and the establishment of Constitutional Commission and independent offices. Devolution brought government resources and decision-making closer to the people. Constitutional commissions and independent offices were established to protect the sovereignty of the people, secure observance by all state organs of democratic values and principles, and promote constitutionalism. Through these institutions, the Constitution was intended to take root across the Republic and find expressions in the daily lives of Kenyans. 16 years on, this Katiba Day provides an occasion to account for how faithfully these institutions have discharged their mandates and how meaningfully their work has advanced the constitutional promise. Are our institutions protecting rights and serving citizens? Are they strengthening accountability? Are their constitutional mandates producing measurable improvements in the lives of the people? These questions lie at the heart of today's symposium. They guide this national examination of the progress made, the obligations that remain, and the work required to give full effect to the Constitution. That work calls for sustained coordination amongst the institutions established under our constitutional order. Within the organization of the national government, the office of the Deputy President is responsible for coordinating relations between the two levels of government and facilitating engagement with constitutional commissions and independent offices. It is pursuant to that mandate that His Excellency, the Deputy President, has provided leadership in convening the 2026 Katiba Day Symposium and shaping its constitutional accountability agenda. To set the context for the proceedings and frame the constitutional responsibilities that will guide our deliberations, it is now my singular honor and privilege to invite the Deputy President to address this symposium and thereafter invite His Excellency the President to make his remarks. Sir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency the Deputy President.
Your Excellency, sir, I ride on all the protocols that have been established already and would like to say the following before I invite you, Your Excellency. That on a moment like this one, 5 things, at least for me, ran through my mind. The first is on the 16th anniversary of celebrating the Constitution that we established for ourselves to guide the creation of a modern Kenya. It is an occasion to look at how far we have traveled in the journey of living up to the aspirations of our Constitution as captured in the preamble, which has just been recited for us, but also in the foundational articles of the Constitution that form the bedrock upon which our constitutional architecture is raised. These foundational articles define Kenya as a democratic multi-party state. It defines the territory of Kenya in Article 5, where it stretches from, and the subnational units that constitute Kenya, the 47 counties of our republic. It defines us as a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious society determined to live together as one sovereign, indivisible nation. Your Excellency, it is a good time for us to reflect on how far we have advanced our sovereignty and the sovereignty of the people of Kenya, how far we have kept the unity of our nation, and how far we've traveled in forging tolerance and finding strength as a nation in our diversity. The second item, or the second theme that runs through my reflection on a day like this as a citizen of Kenya, is how far again in those 16 years, Your Excellency, we have been able to perfect our vertical relationships. Looking at the Constitution, a relationship is envisaged between those who act on behalf of the state and the people. The relationship between the legislature, judiciary, and the executive at the national level, and the executive and the legislature at the county level, and also holders of constitutional commissions and independent offices. How the three arms of government and the two arms of government at the county level relate to one another, and especially relate to the citizens of Kenya, the vertical relationship. Number three is the horizontal relationship among the arms of government themselves and the levels of government, and how we have come to perfect devolution, to respect the independence of the judiciary, to respect the independence of the legislature, how far the legislature has been a check on the executive, and how far the judiciary has helped us to interpret the laws of our land. That is the third thing that runs through my mind. But there is a fourth theme that runs through my mind, Your Excellency. And this is the software of our nation. Our Constitution envisages that this nation, other than the development we do for ourselves, will be run on the basis of certain values, national values, and principles of our governance. Article 10, read together with Article 232 of the Constitution, provides the software of our nation. And the question is, to what extent have we been patriotic? To what extent have we advanced the rule of law, human rights, democracy, environmental sustainability, accountability, the values of the public service in Article 232, etc., etc. And I think on a day like this one, we will be listening to one another to find out what journey we have covered and where the gaps are so that we can perfect our nation's software as we also strengthen its hardware. Finally, Your Excellency, on a day like this one, I and perhaps a few others in this room are curious to reflect on the 16 years that we have taken to advance the requirements of the two legs on which our country and our democracy is founded. These two legs are found in the Bill of Rights, but they are also scattered everywhere else, including the preamble. The first limb is the limb of democracy and the need to advance a nation founded on human dignity and human rights and democratic ideals. But there is a second limb, Your Excellency. And this is the limb that you invited us to begin a conversation on as we look towards a Kenya beyond 2030. And this is the limb of prosperity. I dare say, Your Excellency, before I invite you, that as you reminded us when you were launching this conversation, that the aspiration of our constitutional order is very much about democracy, but is also very much about creating wealth for the citizens of Kenya, empowering the citizens, and realizing the aspects of the Bill of Rights that give dignity and empowerment to the citizen, creating a wealthy, healthy Kenya. Rights that have been ignored for some time now around decent housing, their right to health, the right to access the things that make life convenient and comfortable. And I dare say, Africa, Kenya, the developing world must not shy away from pursuing wealth and talking about wealth creation as much as we advance democracy. And therefore, mine, Your Excellency, is to listen to you and to the many other people that I see gathered here. I see the fathers of our Constitution present here. I see the children of our Constitution right here. And because we have a long morning ahead of us, and because also I see many people who are much more qualified on the matters of today's discussion than I am, I want to stop there and request that we be upstanding and invite His Excellency the President to set the tone for this meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Speak to the nation.
Thank you very much. Please, let's take our seats. Asante sana. Distinguished guests, fellow citizens, ladies and gentlemen, on this day, 16 years ago, Kenya did not merely promulgate a new supreme law. We entered a new constitutional order and renewed the covenant upon which our republic is established. Generations of Kenyans had struggled and sacrificed for this moment. They wanted a nation governed not by the whims of the mighty and powerful, but by the sovereign will of the people. A nation in which authority would be restrained by law, public office exercised as a trust, and every institution held accountable to the citizens it serves. With that in mind, Katiba Day, 16 years later, must be more than an annual anniversary. It must be a day of national accounting. We must take a collective pause and reflect on a few critical questions. Have we faithfully implemented the Constitution? Have we exercised the authority it confers upon us responsibly? Have we effectively delivered the rights that the Constitution guarantees? And have our institutions fully honored the purposes for which they were established? These questions apply to the executive, to Parliament, to the judiciary, to the national and county governments, to constitutional commissions and independent offices, and to every state and public officer. Ladies and gentlemen, our Constitution performs two equally important principles. First, it restrains power. It shares authority, establishes checks and balances, protects fundamental freedoms, and provides remedies against abuse. Second, it manages power. It commands the state to govern, protect, and provide and progressively realize the social and economic rights of the people. Our responsibility is to uphold both obligations. Power must be managed and rights must be assured. That is why Article 43 is central to any honest assessment of constitutional implementation. It guarantees every person the right to the highest attainable standards of health, accessible and adequate housing, and reasonable standards of sanitation, freedom from hunger, and adequate food of acceptable quality, clean and safe water in adequate quantities, social security, and education. It further declares that no person shall be denied emergency medical treatment and requires the state to provide appropriate social security to persons unable to support themselves and their dependents. These are not ornamental provisions placed in our Constitution. They are fundamental rights. Article 21 requires the state to take legislative, policy, and other measures, including the setting of standards, to achieve the progressive realization of what I have stated. But progressive realization does not mean indefinite postponement. It recognizes that resources are finite, but requires every government to take reasonable, deliberate, concrete, and measurable steps towards fulfilling these rights. Progress must therefore be visible in whether a mother can obtain health care, whenever and whether an emergency patient is treated before being asked for pay, whether a family has clean water, whether a child can attend school, and whether a citizen can afford a decent home, and whether a vulnerable person can live in dignity. To my mind, therefore, the ultimate test of the constitutional implementation is not how often we quote the Constitution or invoke constitutionalism. It is how closely the daily experience of the citizens reflect the promise of the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, when this administration sought the mandate of the people in 2022, it was not merely on the basis of campaign rhetoric or political sloganeering. We placed a concrete proposal on the delivery of Article 43 at the center of our national transformation agenda. Universal health care, affordable housing, food security, education, and social protection became central pillars of our national transformation plan. The bottom-up economic transformation agenda was, from the outset, designed as an instrument for the implementation of the Constitution. That is why, over the last 4 years, we have been translating constitutional obligations into practical benefits across healthcare, housing, education, agriculture, and devolution. More than 32 million Kenyan citizens are now registered, with 8 million being treated by Social Health Authority. Over 100,000 community health promoters are servicing households, and the 922 Lifeline is strengthening access to emergency care. More than 274,000 affordable homes are under construction, creating 1.1 million jobs. We have also recruited more than 100,000 teachers and constructed 23,000 classrooms to boost education outcomes and rolled out a new funding model for our university education. At the same time, agricultural reforms are increasing food production, reducing agricultural inputs, putting more income into farmers' pockets, and strengthening service delivery through county governments. By no means is this work complete. Significant steps remain. Nevertheless, these interventions demonstrate that the promise of our new constitution is steadily becoming the lived experience of more Kenyans today than was the case before. This same constitutional obligation must now guide the national conversation on Kenya beyond 2030. As we consider the country we want to build beyond the present development horizon, we must not begin, and we will not be beginning, from a barren place. The Constitution has already defined our destination, and that is a democratic, prosperous, equitable, and inclusive republic founded on human dignity, social justice, sustainable development, and the sovereignty of the people. The task before us is to translate that constitutional destination into a coherent national development charter. We must determine how the next generation of growth will deliver the rights guaranteed in the Constitution, how devolution will unlock the potential of every part of Kenya, how innovation, technology, and enterprise will expand opportunity, how economic progress will be reconciled with environmental stewardship, and how Kenya's choices will protect rather than mortgage the future of generations yet to come. Kenya beyond 2030 must therefore be more than a new economic blueprint or a catalogue of projects. It must be a compact between the state and the citizen, between the present and the future, and between our national ambition and our collective responsibility. Let me repeat that. Kenya beyond 2030 must therefore be more than a new economic blueprint or a catalogue of projects. It must be a compact between the state and the citizens, between the present and the future, and between our national ambition and our collective responsibility. Its success will not only be measured by the size of our economy, the height of our buildings, or the reach of our infrastructure. It will be measured by the dignity, opportunity, security, and quality of life enjoyed by every citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me and us to another consequential question of accountability in our constitutional democracy. What is the place of an electoral mandate within a constitutional order? Political parties present manifestos to the people. Citizens consider competing visions and elect a government. That mandate carries democratic legitimacy and imposes a responsibility on leaders to keep their word and deliver on their promise. The ballot gives the mandate. The Constitution establishes the boundaries. The public institutions ensure that both are respected. How much constitutional space must an elected government have to implement the program upon which it was elected? When that program is challenged, how should courts distinguish between reviewing constitutionality and making policy choices constitutionally entrusted to elected institutions? When a court finds that a policy violates the Constitution, how should the executive and Parliament respond promptly and constructively? How should courts protect rights while remaining attentive to institutional roles, public resources, and practical consequences of their decisions? How do we preserve constitutional review without unnecessarily paralyzing legitimate government action? How do we ensure that checks and balances remain instruments of accountability and holding government to account rather than pathways to institutional gridlock? These questions do not constitute any attack on any institution or infringement on any institution. Judicial independence is non-negotiable. Courts must remain free to interpret the Constitution, protect rights, and invalidate unlawful action. Equally, executive, legislative, and judicial authority all derive legitimacy from the people and must be exercised in their service. Where a government acts unlawfully, it must obey the courts and correct its course. Where lawful policy choices fall within the constitutional authority of elected institutions, that democratic space must also be respected. Ladies and gentlemen, accountability also requires us to confront difficult moments in our recent national life. During the protests of 2024 and those that followed, young Kenyans and other citizens exercised their constitutional freedoms to speak, assemble, demonstrate, picket, and petition public authorities. Their message was clear. They wanted to be heard. They demanded greater accountability, better government, and a meaningful place in shaping the future of their nation. Those demands were not an assault on democracy. Peaceful protest, criticism, and dissent are essential to democracy. Yet, those protests also presented our republic with a profound constitutional question. How do we protect the citizens' right to protest while at the same time fulfilling the state's obligation to preserve constitutional order? The Constitution itself provides the starting point. Article 37 protects the right of every person peaceably and unarmed to assemble, demonstrate, picket, and present petitions to public authorities. That protection must be real. No Kenyan should lose their life, liberty, or dignity merely for criticizing government, expressing an unpopular opinion, or participating in peaceful demonstration. I recognize the pain that remains from the events of that period. Some families lost loved ones. Serious allegations were made concerning unlawful arrests, enforced disappearances, and the excessive use of lethal force. We cannot honor the Constitution by looking away from such allegations. Every credible allegation of a human rights violation must be investigated independently, thoroughly, and transparently. Where wrongdoing is established, those responsible must be held accountable in accordance with the law. At the same time, Defending the rights of peaceful protesters does not require us to excuse crime committed under the cover of protest. The Constitution protects peaceful and unarmed assembly. It does not protect arson, looting, lawlessness, violence, intimidation, attacks on citizens, or the destruction of public and private property. Sorry. We must therefore distinguish carefully between a citizen exercising a constitutional right and an individual committing criminal offenses. We must neither criminalize protest because of the actions of a few, nor legitimize criminal conduct merely because it occurs in the course of a protest. Rights and responsibilities are not enemies. Responsibility protects the conditions in which everyone's right can be enjoyed. The right to protest carries a responsibility to remain peaceful and unarmed. The duty to maintain order carries an obligation to respect life, dignity, and the law. The authority to govern carries a responsibility to listen. The authority and the freedom to disagree carries a responsibility to preserve the democratic institutions through which disagreement can be expressed and resolved. Government belongs to the people. Parliament belongs to the people. The courts belong to the people. The institutions of the republic belongs to the people. They may be criticized, challenged, and required to account, but they must not be destroyed because they are the instruments through which the people govern themselves. Our national task, therefore, is not to choose between liberty and order. It is to build an order founded on liberty and to exercise liberty in a manner that preserves the constitutional order. Let me repeat that. Our national task, therefore, is not to choose between liberty and order. It is to build an order founded on liberty and to exercise liberty in a manner that preserves the constitutional order. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution belongs to all of us. Its authority binds all of us. Its rights protects all of us. Its responsibilities call on all of us to account. Accountability cannot end with defending institutional territory, observing procedures, or publishing reports. Ultimately, we must account for outcomes, whether we have protected the sovereignty of the people, upheld human dignity, preserved constitutional order, used public resources responsibly, and brought the rights guaranteed by our Constitution within the reach of more citizens. 16 years ago, we gave ourselves a transformative Constitution. Our responsibility today is to fulfill its promise and build a democratic, prosperous, and transformed republic. That is the meaning of Katiba at 16. What we now say, Kenya yetu, wajibu wetu. I know there will be a robust conversation after this. I just thought of provoking us to have a conversation in this context as we celebrate our Constitution. And it is a moment for us to reflect collectively as a nation, not pointing fingers, not avoiding responsibility, not trying to excuse what is not right, but to honestly talk not at, but with each other. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Another round of applause for His Excellency as we take our seats. Thank you, Your Excellency. As mentioned by His Excellency, we are going to have a number of discussions. Our first panel discussion is going to be on the state of accountability. And I'll request that the choir, you take your position as we now set up the stage for that discussion. It is going to be discussion basically on the state of accountability by constitutional commissions and independent offices. But while we set up the stage for that particular discussion, we'll have the All Saints Cathedral Choir together with the Presidential Escort Band that will sing a song. And this particular song is I Vow to Thee, My Country, featuring a specially newly commissioned second and third verse honoring Kenya's Katiba. And if you look up, you'll see we have 16 flags that are flying up there and behind on the backstage, which is just a reminder of the 16 years of our Katiba 2010. So the choir, together with the Presidential Escort Band, are going to give us a wonderful song, I Vow to Thee, My Country, featuring a special newly commissioned second and third verse honoring Kenya's Katiba. Choir, over to you.
Let's
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And before we get to the panel discussion, allow me, Your Excellency, to invite Honorable Dorcas Agei-Kodwor, the Attorney General, the state law, to make some submissions before we then have the panel discussion, which will be looking at the state of accountability. Welcome.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, the Deputy President, Your Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, the Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, the Speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to introduce this important conversation on the state of accountability by constitutional commissions and independent offices. Some experts say that constitutionalism divides power among government branches, institutions, for purposes of checks and balances in a political system. As evidence of that division, Your Excellency, on behalf of the women in leadership, I wish to express our gratitude because out of the 12, chapter 15, institutions that are the subject of today's symposium, 6 of them are led by women. And that is an example of constitutionalism. The Honorable the Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court is the chair of the Judicial Service Commission. Margaret Nyakango is the controller of budget. Nancy Gadungu is the Auditor General. Honorable Jaldesa Rehema is the chair of MGEC. Clarice Oganga is the chair of Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And Mary Chebukati is the chair of the Revenue Allocation. Not forgetting the Chief Registrar of the Court and myself, we found favor before God and before you, and we are grateful for having been given that opportunity to assist you in nurturing constitutionalism in this country. We have been supported by all branches of government. As we commemorate 16 years of our Constitution, we are invited to do more than celebrate the existence of the constitutional order that we created in 2010. We are called to examine whether our institutions are living up to the expectations of the Katiba and ultimately to the expectations of the Kenyan people. It is in this sense that the theme of today's symposium, Katiba at 16, Kenya yetu, wajibu wetu, tuwajibike, is particularly appropriate. Our Constitution is ours. Our institutions are ours. And the responsibility for making the Constitution work is equally ours. The great constitutional transformation of 2010 was not simply the redistribution of the institutional functions. It was the redefinition of the relationship between power and responsibility. It deliberately created institutions with distinct mandates, checks and balances, safeguards for independence and clear responsibilities to the people. In particular, constitutional commissions and independent offices occupy a very important place in that architecture. They exist to protect the sovereignty of the people, secure observance by state organs of democratic values and principles, and to promote constitutionalism. Their independence is therefore not incidental. It is fundamental. But there is an important distinction we must continue to appreciate. Our institutions are independent, but they are not isolated. Indeed, one of the enduring lessons of 16 years of constitutional implementation is that independence and interdependence must coexist. The Constitution does not contemplate institutions operating as a separate island or separate islands. It gives institutions distinct mandates, but places all of them within one constitutional operative framework, serving one sovereign, the people of Kenya. A commission may be independent in the exercise of its mandate, but the fulfillment of that mandate will often require engagement with Parliament, the executive, the judiciary, other commissions and independent officers, county governments, and citizens. The Auditor General may identify questions concerning the use of public resources. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission may confront questions of integrity and corruption. The Commission Administrative of Justice may address maladministration. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights may raise questions touching on the protection of rights and freedoms. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission has its own constitutional responsibilities within the management of public resources. In fact, sometimes Kenyans wonder that if all these things are well spelled in the Constitution, how come some institutions are still going to the judiciary to interpret their mandate? How come some independent officers and constitutional commissions still think that their powers are not properly being exercised when the Constitution has given them the power and the legislations that create them give them the operative atmosphere? These mandates are distinct, but the constitutional objectives they serve are interconnected. The challenge, therefore, is not to weaken institutional independence in the name of cooperation. Neither should we use independence as a reason for institutional isolation. We must always endeavor to build a culture in which institutions are sufficiently independent to dispense and discharge their mandates fearlessly, while being sufficiently interconnected to make the constitutional system work effectively. That requires mutual respect. It requires consultation. It requires information sharing where the law permits. It requires coordination action where mandates intersect. And importantly, it requires each institution to recognize that constitutional effectiveness measures constitutional visibility. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to another important question for Katiba 16. Are our institutions as strong as the Constitution requires them to be? Institution building is not an event. It is a continuous constitutional responsibility. 16 years after promulgation, we must continue to strengthen the institutions entrusted with safeguarding our democracy. That includes strengthening their legal frameworks. It means ensuring they have the institutional capacity, professional competence, and resources necessary to discharge their mandates. It means safeguarding their independence. It also means strengthening their internal systems of governance, accountability, transparency, and performance. Strong institutions are not simply institutions that possess power. Strong institutions are institutions that exercise their power lawfully, consistently, fairly, and effectively. They must be capable, just as surely offices fulfilling the purposes for which they were created. Are they accessible to ordinary citizens? Are they sufficiently responsive? Are their recommendations and decisions translated into meaningful action? Do our institutions collaborate effectively when mandates intersect? Are there legal, financial, or administrative weaknesses that are preventing some institutions from fully performing their constitutional functions? Most importantly, can the ordinary Kenyan see the difference that the Constitution has made in his or her life? These are difficult questions, but a mature constitutional democracy must be willing to ask difficult questions of itself. Just like at the beginning, the provost gave us an example of the donkey dung and the difficulty of taking care of it and the shame of acknowledging that is there and dealing with it. And I think that is a reflection, or we can juxtapose the questions that we are asking today to that. Because constitutionalism must ultimately be felt. It must be felt by a citizen who seeks accountability for the misuse of public resources. It must be felt by a Kenyan who encounters maladministration. It must be felt by a person whose rights have been violated, and it must be felt by communities seeking fairness, equality, and justice. It must be felt in the integrity of a public service and in the responsible management of public resources. If the Constitution remains impressive on paper but does not translate into the lived experience of citizens, then our constitutional project remains incomplete. At 16, therefore, perhaps the most useful question is no longer simply whether the architecture created in 2010 was sound. The question is whether we are making the architecture work. The Constitution is only as strong as the institutions that implement it, and those institutions are only as strong as the trust they command from the people. The relationship between our institution must therefore never be reduced to competition over mandate or territory. There will naturally be points of tension within our constitutional democracy. Indeed, institutional checks and balances sometimes require tension, but constitutional tension should be productive and not destructive. Our institutions may disagree, they may scrutinize one another, they may challenge each other's decisions through constitutionally established processes, but they must always remain anchored in the recognition that they are components of the same constitutional republic. Independent, yes, but interdependent. Different mandates, but one constitutional mission. Different institution, but one people, and ultimately one constitution. As Attorney General, I approach this conversation conscious of the distinctive place of the Office of the Attorney General within our constitutional architecture. My role includes advising the government, defending the public interest, supporting the rule of law, and contributing to the continual strengthening of Kenya's legal and institutional framework. That responsibility demands that we protect the space necessary for constitutional institutions to perform their mandates, while also encouraging cooperation, accountability, and fidelity to the Constitution across government. It requires us to recognize a principle that is fundamental to the 2010 Constitution. No institution is above the Constitution, but no constitutional institution should be subjected to the improper control of another. This is the principle of constitutional comity. The session, therefore, provides an important opportunity for honest institutional reflection. We should celebrate what has worked over the 16 years, but we must also have the courage to identify where institutional practice has fallen short of constitutional expectation. Katiba 16 should not merely be an anniversary. It should be a checkpoint, a moment at which we ask, what have we built? What must we strengthen? What must we change? And what must we do differently over the next 16 years to ensure that the constitutional promise is more fully realized? This morning, we are privileged to hear from the institutions that occupy some of the most consequential spaces in this constitutional accountability and architecture. And as the Office of the Attorney General, I want to confirm that we have gotten the greatest cooperation and coordination with all the branches of government, all the independent offices, and all the constitutional offices under Chapter 15. We are honored this morning to have with us the Auditor General, Nancy Gadungu, Bishop Oginde of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Charles Orinda, Commissioner on Administrative of Justice, Clarissa Woro Ganga of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, Sami Chepkwony, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, these gentlemen and ladies represent different mandates, but beneath those mandates lies one common constitutional responsibility: to protect the public interest and to ensure that public power remains faithful to the people. I therefore invite them to speak candidly, tell us what is working, tell us where the gaps remain, tell us what threatens institutional effectiveness, tell us where greater interagency cooperation is required, tell us how we can strengthen our institutions without compromising their independence. and tell us what must be done to ensure that 16 years after promulgation, Kenya continues moving closer to the constitutional republic envisioned by its people in 2010. I would therefore invite the panelists to reflect candidly on the progress made over the last 16 years, the lessons learned that have emerged, the challenges that remain, and the opportunities for strengthening accountability and institutional effectiveness going forward. Because ultimately, the test of our Constitution will not simply be the beauty of its text, it will be the strength of the institutions it created, the integrity of those entrusted with public power, the accountability of those institutions to the people, and the extent to which every Kenyan can say the promise of the Constitution is becoming a lived reality. With those few remarks, it is now my pleasure to invite our moderator, Eric Latif, to lead us into this discussion. Thank you, and may God bless us all. Thank you.
A slight change on the moderator. We'll have Ibrahim Karanja, who's a senior reporter from Nation Media Group, who's going to moderate this session. So Ibrahim, karibu. Please, let's go straight to the Q&A and do that.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, the Deputy President. Allow me to ride on the protocol that has already been established. And in this particular session, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to honestly have a conversation about your role, the role of constitutional commissions and independent officers, not only limited to the 5 that are represented here, but all the commissions and independent officers in the country. The President has invited us to reflect about questions, important questions, pertinent questions, and so has the Attorney General. And just to set this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. When you hear about where we are as a country, when, as the Auditor General, year on year, you keep pointing out to the same audit issues from institutions, when, as the EACC, the concern about Kenya, or the concern from Kenyans remain about corruption, when, from the Commission on Administrative Justice, when the concern is about access to information from Kenyans, when your own report states that 72% of complaints that have been raised by Kenyans from the year 2025 is not addressed, when we hear from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights and talk about a section of Kenyans feeling that the rule of law, constitutionalism, is not being met, and when we go beyond these institutions that are here and speak about things that have come to the public fore, even in recent days, such as, Your Excellency, the issue about employment of teachers and serious allegations that have been made in public, then this Constitutional Commission and independent officers that are here have got questions to answer. Not to softly talk about issues, but honestly reflect about where we are as a country. Let me start with what you all say in your annual reports. There's one thing that will always come out: we have budgetary constraints. Most of the times, we do not have timely disbursement of monies. And the question to all of you, and I will start with you, Auditor General, is when the person in charge of money flow to your institution is a person you are required to hold to account, then does that affect independence?
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to you. To answer that question, or series of questions, Moderator, it is important first to put into context the role and responsibilities of the Constitutional Commissions, which have been articulated very well by His Excellency the President and the Honorable the Attorney General. And that is to protect the sovereignty of the people, to secure the observance of democratic values and principles by all state organs, and to promote constitutionalism. It would be remiss of us to go straight into the challenges. It is important first to give a report card to the citizens on what have we achieved, how have we worked well with government, what remains to be done, and how do we agree on the way forward collectively. And there are various achievements that have been made across the board. We have looked at our assessment against 7 key pillars under Article 10 of the Constitution on the national values and principles of governance. Very, very key in constitutionalism. One is anchoring constitutionalism and the rule of law, strengthening public finance and fiscal discipline, advancing democratic electoral and security sector governance, combating corruption and enforcing integrity, promoting equity, cohesion and land justice, and equitable access to essential public services. And these have been addressed by His Excellency the President. They've also been addressed as the roles and responsibilities of constitutional commissions and independent offices. And there are achievements that have been made in this country. And we must, of course, recognize that achievements have been made. 16 years down the line, we are not at the same place that we were 16 years in 2010 when Kenyans made the decision that we needed another roadmap in terms of constitutionalism. Now, to the questions you've asked, what affects us in terms of delivery? Despite the progress that we've made, despite the outcomes on citizens, because under those pillars, there are real felt outcomes on citizens. And citizens measure performance and productivity, because now we've moved from performance to productivity. They measure it on their own living, felt experiences, not on what they hear has happened in other areas or for other people or in other towns. They ask themselves, yes, we have had these statistics, we have had these issues being raised at national level. How has it translated into an outcome, into a result in my life? So we've seen issues when we raise audit reports in terms of improvements. We've seen changes in policies. We've seen amendments to laws. We've seen directives even from the National Treasury on accountability. And that is progress, because it means whereas previously funds may have been misused or misallocated, or there was outright theft, then the Constitution Commissions, based on their mandate, whether to audit, whether to control the budget, whether to go after the criminal elements who are, where there is corruption or who are stealing, or whether to adjudicate cases of mismanagement of public resources. We have seen results. You have seen results. Nancy, my question to you is, when the person controlling the purse is a person you are required or have mandate over constitutionally, leave alone the allocation of monies by Parliament, there is the disbursement of funds which you keep citing in your reports is delayed. When this happens, how does it affect your independence? Indeed, that is one of the key issues that constitutional commissions are facing, lack of adequate resourcing. But for the Auditor General, the Constitution says that Parliament has the responsibility to allocate adequate funds for all constitutional commissions and independent offices under Article 249. But that's not always the case. And of course, we are alive to the fact that we are still growing as an economy, that we cannot always get the resources that we need, that cash flow is affected by revenue collections, and this affects entities across the board. Right. But we must ask ourselves, which entities need to actually do the work on the ground so that they provide the advice on how we can grow, have economic growth, right, economic empowerment, and ensure that cash flows are predictable and the targets are met. Thank you. That is the Constitution Commissions. Bishop Oginde, and thank you, Nancy, because you're also speaking as the chairperson of the caucus of chairpersons of independent officers and holders of independent officers and Constitution Commissions. Bishop Oginde, the issue of corruption continues to frustrate many Kenyans. You give us reports every year that we've done so much. We have recovered this much asset. However, we are still talking about corruption. We are still seeing
the Auditor General flag what are corrupt activities from various entities, what exactly needs to be done to finally, 16 years down the line, slay this dragon of corruption?
Thank you very much. The Constitution provides different various safeguards against the use of public resources. I think the greatest and most important thing we need to do as a nation, in line with the Constitution that we have given to ourselves, is for all of us to appreciate that the resources that have been allocated and given sacrificially by Kenyans need to be used for the purposes for which it has been allocated. That when any of us takes any of that and uses it for their own private gain, it affects every individual. So there's a need for a change of mindset. All of us who have been given responsibilities in any public office, that office is held in trust for Kenyans. And the resources that come to us are not for us to use. Unless and until we have that change of mind, we will continue to talk about corruption, and I can say authoritatively, laws alone will not give us the results that we are looking for. It will take our personal responsibility as individuals in every office where we find ourselves to recognize that the money that I have is not for me to use for myself. It is for the public good. When that is done, then our work will be more of a monitor. You know, a few people who may be making noise in class, we will try and help them not to make that noise. But when that responsibility is not there, then we'll continue chasing each other around the compound.
We always talk about the ideal situation, Bishop Oginde. Today, it's 16 years after the 2010 Constitution. Let us be real.
Yes.
Let me ask you a very uncomfortable question.
Yes.
Which category of leaders do you find easy as EACC to investigate, and which category of leaders do you find very difficult to investigate?
I don't think there is any category that is easy or difficult, because corruption is a very personal thing. Now, to answer your question more directly, any person who is in office and is being investigated within the same office where they are leaders, it becomes very difficult, because those people can interfere with the evidence that we need. Those people can make sure that we don't get the documents that we need. That person can deal with any person who wants to be a witness to what has happened. So any person who is in office that we are at the same time investigating, it becomes very difficult. Whether they are at the lower level or at the highest level.
At that point, those persons holding office are seated here today.
Yes.
His Excellency the President, the Deputy President, Cabinet Secretaries, Governors are seated here today.
Right.
What would you tell them that we need or they need to stop doing so that it's easy for you? Very simple question. Speak to them directly.
I think I have already said. The first thing to each and every one of us sitting here, including those who are here on the platform, we must recognize that the resources in our hands are not ours to use for personal gain. That's where it starts. If each one of us were to do that, our work will be very easy.
All right.
Now, secondly, our constitutional commissions are not just EACC. Our constitutional commissions are mandated by the Constitution to do the work that they're supposed to do. We have seen situations where we are going to investigate or try to find out information from an individual, all of us seated in this room. And some of us, His Excellency has just said, we must honor and respect the Constitution. So if we are called upon to respond to any constitutional commission or independent office, let's take it that the Constitution is the one inviting you. It's not Oginde. It's not Gadungu. It's not, it is the Constitution in calling you. We have seen situations where we are defying the constitutional mandates that have been given to us,
right,
and that undermines our work.
That undermines your work. We'll be coming back to you because you will all agree with me that we have seen what I would call public relations from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Very grand arrests, media presence. Then after that, many people would ask, then what next? And those are the questions we'll be coming to you to answer. But let me get to the Commission on Administrative Justice. A report you released just 2 days ago says 72% of complaints against institutions from the year 2025 have not been addressed. If I get to the specific numbers, 630 complaints from 2025, then we talk about, rather 813 complaints, 228 only have been solved, and 579 are pending. What does this mean?
Thank you very much for that question. I think before I answer your question, perhaps what we need to do is to ask the people who we try to ask these questions, whether they really understand, one, what our mandates are.
Thank you. We will change the mic for you.
Yes, as I was saying, whether the people that we really are supposed to make accountable understands what it is that they are supposed to do. A simple question like that is that, do the people sitting in front of us here understand Article 73 of the Constitution, which talks about public trust? Here is it. I deal mainly with government officials, and there are certain things that are there in these constitutions called public values of public service, and this is captured in Article 232. Accountability, responsiveness, prompt and effective service, provision to the people of Kenya. When we write to ask for this information, they will tell you that we are paper pushers. They don't respond in time, and that explains why those complaints remain unresolved. So what have we done? I've been able to engage with the various MDAs. This week, I've been meeting the principal secretaries and MDAs that we had identified has many complaints not being resolved. And we realized that part of the reason is that they don't have a way of understanding what, when we write a letter to them, what does that mean? So we have been meeting at the Safari Park from the chief, the principal secretaries, the head of parastatals, the DGs, the chairperson, so that we explain to them why it is important when we ask the things that we ask. It means that there's a Kenyan somewhere needing the answers. Another thing is that there's the issue of government operating in silos. We all need to be able to respond to that question quickly, but you find that if you address, say, the pensions department, they will tell you, we have not gotten the information from TAC because maybe that's a delayed pension, or we have not gotten the information from Department X. Now, they don't have a referral mechanism where if you make an inquiry and somebody sitting there should be able to refer to the relevant department to be able to act on it. And so this is why we are starting by training them, and we want to start at the top level. Very soon we are going to ask the permanent secretaries, the heads of various parastatals to come down so that we take them through what it means to resolve a complaint within the time that we require. Secondly, we also want to have a coordinating mechanism where if the question is cross-cutting, for example, most of the time you'll get the issue of resources. Treasury should be at the center of all these discussions, because if pension has not been paid, these people will say we have not received exchequer. If National Land Commission has acquired land, they will tell you that the money has not been given to, say, Ministry of Roads to pay. And that person, that Kenyan, has come to us to complain that his land was acquired when we were building Thika Road. How many years was Thika Road built? More than 10 years ago. But you find that there is that problem that the ministry and the treasury and the authority are not speaking together.
Let's speak to what the issue actually is. Again, lots of ideal situation, but the reality today. 579 complaints brought to your office for the year 2025 have not been addressed. Your mandate surely cannot just end at communicating to the respective entities. What happens to these 579 cases today? We are almost starting September of 2026. By end of this year, more complaints will be coming to you. So actionable things done or that you can do beyond telling this crowd what the ideal situation ought to be.
Well, as I said, we have decided to engage the people concerned to tell them that this is what you need to do when you receive the the matter. Some of the things are actually just bureaucratic red tapes, which we need to cut down. So what we want is that a person resolving the complaint should be sitting in those ministries and be reporting.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move to another issue that still touches on you, an increase in requests for access to information. 2016, 2017, 32 requests. 2025, 2026, 654 requests. What does this speak to? What does it say of the institutions that are mandated to serve?
Well, the request for information is a new area which is growing, and we like it because it enhances public accountability. Unfortunately, people still, again, don't understand that when you request the information, you should not come to Kicc as the first point of call. You're supposed to send your request to that information, to the person holding the information. You're supposed to wait for 21 days. Kicc's jurisdiction kicks in after 21 days if you have not received the response. Now, when that happens, you now come to us and say, we requested this information and it's not been provided. And we will look at the information that you request. But first of all, not every information can be given. And so we'll look at it according to the law and see whether it falls under Section 6 of the Act, which are exempted. If it is information that should be given, then we will ask the institution why they're not giving that information, and that they should be able to provide that information.
All right.
Yeah.
Clarisse, where are we 16 years later in terms of human rights and the rule of law? Let's speak to human rights. Let's speak about the very basic right to life.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. Allow me to, first of all, just speak to one of the biggest achievements of the 2010 Constitution, and to say that the issue of human rights has been the biggest beneficiary of the 2010 Constitution. Why do I say that? I say that because the language, you'll find that the language that has now been adopted, if you look at issues governance, issues development, human rights has become part and parcel of the language that we are using in Kenya. You'll also find that issues human rights are no longer, just an issue for human rights lawyers and for human rights activists. It's an issue that cuts across. And I'll just take you as an example. If you listened carefully to the speech by His Excellency, I think 90% of it spoke to issues human rights. And that has been the transformation of the new constitution. If there's any language that Kenyans now understand fully, is the issue of human rights. Everything is viewed from the lens of human rights. So we must give it to the 2010 constitution that it has transformed even the relationship between citizens and the state, where now the state is required to look at everything that they do from a human rights perspective. Now, on to your question about the issues around right to life. You'll find that that's one of the rights that has been protected by the 2010 Constitution and provides that everyone has the right to life. And the right to life is not just about health issues, but it's also about who has the right to take away a life. And that's one of the issues that I think we've been grappling with here in Kenya. And I think it was acknowledged in the previous speeches that has been given, that sometimes life has been taken extrajudicially when it was not, legally taken away. So it's one of the biggest challenges that the Kenya National Commission continues to record. And unfortunately, the complaints that the Commission receives on this particular right has to do with complaints against the government, taking away life, illegally. And that's one of the rights that is really protected by the Constitution, and that as a country, we must ensure that we deal with that particular right, because the right to life is really fundamental. That once a life, as was stated by the President, once it's taken away, it's taken. You cannot bring it back. And yet, as a country, as a government, we are working towards improving the lives of citizens.
It is true that the right to life is the most important, I must say. However, the question, and you have pointed out, that most of the times when KNCHR receives complaints about violation of this particular right, the blame falls squarely on the government. And we have seen actions by the government, for instance, on those people who were injured and those who died from previous protests. Compensation is currently ongoing. However, there is a question about not just compensation, but justice. If it touches on police officers, there is an officer who pulled the trigger. When families, when civil societies are following up on these issues, the investigative agencies, such as IPOA, would say there are no people here who have recorded statements and such responses as you've had. Then the question by many Kenyans becomes, beyond compensation, what is the KNCHR doing to ensure that we walk towards justice? Because the many killings that we've seen, a very negligible number is currently being prosecuted in court. Very many people are free out there. So what is the KNCHR doing?
Thank you very much. I think back to your question about accountability and issues around redress for human rights violations. It's important to note that compensation and reparations is just one facet of accountability and redress. And mainly, if you look at issues around reparations and compensation, they look at cases where the threshold for prosecution is quite low, and hence that direction of compensation and reparations. If you look at the cases that go to court, our courts require a very high threshold to prove a case. And you'll find that sometimes that's where our cases fail. You can only take a case to court that has evidence, that has witnesses, that meets a certain threshold. And that's where many of the cases fail.
And that calls for reflection. Let me take this conversation to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Today, I'll give you very live examples that many Kenyans perhaps expected during the promulgation of the Constitution are issues we would not be dealing with 16 years later. Some counties are having healthcare workers on strike. Why? Because of remuneration and because of related issues. These are issues that many Kenyans thought, with the establishment of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, which advises on remuneration for public officers and actually sets remuneration for state officers, you would see this happening. Where is the gap between the governments, be it the national government or the 47 county governments, in terms of implementing what you as SRC is recommending in terms of salaries, so that we do not see the very many industrial actions that we are seeing in the country?
Thank you for that question. First of all, I think I want to clarify that all levels and arms of government have been very, very cooperative with the SRC, at least during my time, in implementing the policy advisories that SRC have issued, both at national, county levels, judiciary, parliament, and the executive. So they have been compliant. The small gap you see that is still causing a bit of industrial issues is there are some policy and legislative gaps around remuneration, especially around collective bargaining. And we think, arising from the resolutions of the productivity conference that was concluded in June, we are accelerating those policy and legislative issues so that we close that gap. For example, let me give you an example. The way we negotiate CBS right now does not take into account the element of productivity. It assumes that the government always has all this money to pay people. But sometimes the fiscal space is tight. But we have already promised people that we are going to pay you like this, and like the industrial action that you are seeing now in the nurses, dates way back to 2017. You see? Once we tighten the policy and legislative framework around collective bargaining and generally how we compensate public officers and state officers, I think that will be a thing of the past, I assure you.
All right, let me take this to the Attorney General, Dorcas Oduor, before I do another round of questions. Then I'll come to you for very few questions, perhaps 4 of them maximum, from any of you, touching on constitutional commissions and independent offices. But, AG, let me talk to you about encroachment. Last year at a forum like this, when the then chairperson of the caucus of chairpersons of constitutional commissions and holders of independent offices spoke here, he mentioned of the various challenges they were undergoing. One was funding, which we've already addressed, and the second one was encroachment. This encroachment, most of the times, comes from the other arms of government, and particularly the executive. I will invite you to respectfully look at claims made in public just a couple of days ago about employment of teachers and it being done by political players, members of parliament. And these are allegations that came from a very high office, the office of the Speaker of the National Assembly. As Attorney General, where does this place constitutionalism in a government you advise?
As far as I am concerned, all people employed by government, state officers and public officers are bound by law. And when we talk about the rule of law, it means that when you are exercising your power, you must identify the source of that power. Have we ever asked ourselves that how come sometimes there is no problem at all, but when there is change of leadership of an institution or an agency, all of a sudden there is a problem? Is it the problem of the people who are leading those institutions? When they come to us for advice, we go back to the Constitution because our client is actually the government, not an individual. And we protect policies and the laws, and we advise. Just as you saw it in the paper, we also saw it. Nobody has come to us, has complained to us, or has come to us for interpretation. Kenya is a country that is over-legislated. The problem is, how are we implementing the laws? Where does policy and law meet the ground? And when it meets the ground, it meets individuals with perspectives and attitudes. And it is how they exercise that power that causes confusion. Otherwise, at the top level, we are very clear. Our mandates are very clear. And we are always being asked, how does your core mandate meet the ordinary life? And everybody has been given an opportunity and a space to exercise their core mandate. So when individuals have their perspective and they want to be a bottleneck, that is a different story. So we wait for them when they come officially, and then we advise.
All right, Nancy, as chair of this...
And let me tell you, you will wonder that at the Office of the Attorney General, we are registering almost 60 churches a month. 60.
Tell us about it.
You will also wonder that out of those churches, every time they have elections, they disagree. And elections in churches are more brutal, sometimes fatal. They are very violent, and they still come to us to advise. And these are the same people you meet in offices. Until now, we were asking ourselves if the Office of the Attorney General is now litigating between churches when it comes to elections. What about civic election where all these churches come together? Even among the Muslims now, they are fighting about offices and money. Some churches, not all of them. So this is to show the character of the people that we are leading. It is not only in civic elections. Thanks.
All right, Nancy, how bad is this issue of encroachment by whatever power to the roles that are under your caucus?
Thank you. I think we are all aware that there is encroachment and there is a bit of discomfort in people letting go of functions and authorities they had previously under old constitutions that have now been put in the, under the responsibility of different entities. When we were talking about the institutions, we have the three arms of government. We have the constitution commissions and independent offices, very critical for checks and balances. Now, the constitution commissions and independent offices have been given some critical roles and responsibilities and mandates by the Constitution. However, because there is almost a similar or parallel structure within either the executive or the state, there is a bit of disagreements in who is responsible. And sometimes we have to end up in court under the judiciary to interpret, which should not be the case, because at the end of the day, we are serving the same citizens. But if the Constitution clearly indicates that the role and responsibility is for National Land Commission, is the control of budget, is ethics and anti-corruption, is the Human Rights Commission, then that should be respected. And then we can have under the coordination of His Excellency, the Deputy President, on how do we resolve this with mutual respect and with mutual understanding of what the Constitution set up. So that has been one of the issues that have been affecting delivery of services, delivery of development to the citizens. Again, there's a competition on who is accountable or who takes the credit. That now derails the focus that it's about a service that should be delivered to the citizen, and people are fighting over who is responsible and who takes the credit for delivering. So it is about interpreting the Constitution without personal initiatives or responsibilities, or trying to, we call it one-man upship.
Yes.
It's about us working together. And where there has been that mediation or meetings between constitution commissions and maybe State Department's leadership, under, if not the Deputy President, sometimes under His Excellency the President, then we have seen some change and some breakthrough in delivering to the citizens.
Tell us how glaring this, I'll list for you what I think are forms of encroachment, and tell me how glaring they are for the constitutional commissions and independent offices. There is the point where the executive would expressly tell a commission what decision to make. All right? Then there are other forms which I list as encroachment, either through appointments, political appointments, funding, legislation, administrative directives, public attacks. We've seen constitutional commissions at times being subjected to public attacks by those who have the platform. Delayed implementation of recommendations or institutional restructuring. All of you, or at least most of you, have had your recommendations on various issues and some delayed. So how glaring are the issues I've listed in terms of encroachment? Which would you say is the most serious bottleneck?
Thank you. I think as we progress 16 years down the line, it is not as bad as it used to be in 2011, 2012. There was still a bit of storming and norming. Again, we also have to understand that there's an electoral cycle. So when there's new leadership, they have to take stock of what are they responsible for, what can they do within the Constitution, and what are the Constitution commissions and independent offices responsible for.
All right.
Legislation, you did give me a
yes.
list. And I think for this would depend on Constitution Commission and independent offices, lived experiences and interactions with the state in terms of the arms of government. Whether you are engaging with the executive, because of course, and the president didn't say that he has a mandate that he was given by the people to deliver on the visions of and the aspirations that gave him the leadership role. However, within that mandate, there's a constitution that guides and the laws of Kenya that guides on how that mandate should be delivered. Then you have the Constitution commissions that are oversighting to ensure there are no excesses by the state in the delivery of that mandate. There is equality in delivery of that mandate. There is equity and there is inclusiveness, so to speak. So this depends on Constitution Commission by Constitution Commission and the relationship building, right, which now having a place where we can send our issues and hope, of course, they're escalated and solved, has sort of brought down this kind of disagreements.
Right.
But they're still there. And sometimes we choose to handle them diplomatically.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Bishop Oginde, when we speak about EACC and its mandate, we seem to be having an over-focus on corruption. There is a software of the country which His Excellency the Deputy President invited us to speak to: integrity, ethics, which is a very fast E in EACC. We do not see you doing much about this. We've seen people act in conduct that brings disrepute to offices they hold, be it members of parliament, be it governors, be it public principal secretaries, various people. Yet the EACC is increasingly silent about such. Is this no longer your mandate?
Thank you very much. Ethics is one of our mandates, and we have a whole department, directorate that is dealing with matters of ethics. Under that mandate, we ensure the adherence to Chapter 6 of the Constitution. So there are several activities, programs that we undertake in that. One of them is education, to ensure that members of the public and various individuals are aware of what these concerns and our mandate concerns. So we are quite active in this, but the reason that the enforcement seems to get more publicity because many Kenyans view EACC's mandate primarily as enforcement. So they want to see arrests and so on. But we do issue advisories, we do issue cautions to various government entities or individuals who are acting outside of of what is expected of them. And many times this sometimes does not get into the news. And so it may appear like this is an area that we are not quite engaged in. The other thing that we do in that particular area, we help various institutions in terms of helping them to adhere to the ethical practices within the institution themselves. We carry out systems reviews of different entities to find out if there are areas that are potentially liable to breaches of ethics or even corruption. This again would come out in our reports, but as you know, the media picks more on the other side of enforcement. So if you look at the work that we do, especially in the area of prevention, in the area of ethics, we are acting in helping particularly the younger people. We are focused now in helping the younger people in schools, in colleges, in various institutions to instill this issue of ethical conduct and behavior. Now, when it comes to leaders, there's, you talked about, I wouldn't call it encroachment, but sometimes there are overlapping mandates. Say, for example, and a leader conducts themselves or says something that we consider that is unethical. There's NCIC that is supposed to deal with that situation, but on the other hand, EACC also has that mandate. So we have worked collaboratively to see where does this really fall, and we allow the relevant institution to pursue that. But we have several times invited individuals who we feel have breached the ethical codes, especially on Chapter 6, so that they could answer to the practices or the things that they have done. The other thing that we also are mandated under that is the whole issue of declaration of wealth and so on. And we pursue this if there is a breach again in that particular area. And if there are any undeclared or unexplained wealth, we go after them because we believe that this is a way in which they may have crossed the bar. And so these are things that do happen, but many times they don't come to the front, as I said, because of the people expecting us more to arrest people than to enforce ethical conduct.
But it surely must go beyond what media picks. It must be what really happens. Forget about what media picks.
Yes.
Because your mandate is not for the media, it is for the Republic of Kenya. But let me move to the SRC. And when I come back to all of you, because for closing comments, in the interest of time, you'll tell me about when your recommendations are not implemented. The EACC has previously written to the IEBC and given a list of shame of some sorts, but of people who the EACC thought ought not to be on the ballot.
Yes.
That was never followed. However, let me go to the SRC. You have spoken about the fiscal realities of the country and the always ever-rising demand by the various workers, especially employees of government, be it public officers, mostly public officers, to be fairly remunerated, at times not aligning with the fiscal realities the country is in. Then at that particular point, how do we make Kenyans appreciate that, look, this is the situation we are in, these are the fiscal realities that we are in currently, and not to dismiss the demands that you're having or the requests that you're having, but we have to strike a balance?
First of all, I wanted to clarify one thing. I don't know whether the mic is working. Wanted to clarify that, you know, that first question you asked me, Kenyans might think SRC just helps public sector employers to resolve strikes. We do more than that. Actually, under Article 230 of the Constitution, that gives us the mandate to do what we do. Perhaps it is useful, even before I tackle that question, just to tell the country that in the last, since SRC was established, we've been able to manage the balance between that tight fiscal space with what is released to do other things for the country like development, we found that from 55%, where the payroll was taking 55% of all the revenue that is collected at national and county levels, we've managed to reduce it now to 40%. So we've released 15% of revenue to other development priorities for the country. But the PFM Act of 2012 still requires us to bring it to below 35%. And therefore, that question you've asked, I think, is very, very relevant to say, as we bring this figure from 40 to 35%, how do we engage the country to appreciate that we are still below the threshold where salary should be kept within? And it is because of that realization that we saw and said, we've reached 40% wage bill to revenue ratio, mainly by controlling the growth of the wage bill. But if you see, SRC now has been there for actually 15 years, because it took some time to establish it. If you look at that, you can do an average and see these guys have been reducing this thing by 1% every year.
Right.
And somebody can say you are not doing very well. So what we have done is to relook at the strategy of reaching there. And we found that just controlling the wage bill is not sufficient. It will take us longer. That is why we requested His Excellency the President and the government to enable us to do a national productivity conference.
Okay.
The gist of this is to unlock the potential of the public servants and state officers, to ask them and say, this salary we are paying you, what is the return on it? What is the return on it in terms of service delivery to the people of Kenya? And we had a good conversation, and I think we have a solution.
All right.
That we are going to engage at all levels of, actually we are calling it a whole of the nation rollout.
Okay.
Which not only includes government officers, but also the public, because as employees of government are doing their work, doing service delivery, improving revenue collection, making sure the citizen experience good service from productivity of public servants. We are also saying the people of Kenya will need to reciprocate by paying their taxes,
all right,
by paying more taxes. And therefore, when we have that conversation around productivity, not just controlling the wage bill, I think we will not only nail that threshold by the year 2028, I think we are anticipating that it will be achieved by June 2028. But the spin-off will be improved service delivery to the people of Kenya that might lead to more citizen satisfaction and trust of the people of Kenya in their government. Thank you.
Thank you. We really need to wind up and keep our thoughts short. I'll come to you, Clarice. And one thing that His Excellency the President has mentioned here, and has been mentioned by you and other officials previously, is the issue to do with the right to picket, assemble, demonstrate. Let me use one word: protests. However, we have seen in this country, whereas this particular provision has been put to use by Kenyans, there is also that gray area of criminality happening. And there is a conversation about regulating this particular right. When many Kenyans hear regulating, Your Excellency, they would say perhaps the state wants to curtail this particular right. We need a better understanding of what do you mean, so that we are sure we are simply separating criminals from Kenyans exercising their right. Speak of June 2024. Genuine Kenyans were in the streets. We saw Parliament being torched. that was not genuine Kenyans. Anyone who touched parliament, as anyone would say, was a criminal. So how do you separate this? How do we not read malice from that motive of regularizing the right to picket?
Thank you very much for that question. The issue about, and that's Article 37 of the Constitution, that speaks to issues around demonstrations, picketing, and even petitions to various institutions when there's a grievance. Historically, if you look at the issue of demonstrations, Kenyans have used demonstrations to achieve results, especially in terms of realization of human rights. However, it's important to note that a lot of these protests have been infiltrated by criminals.
How do we cure this?
Regulations. Article 37 provides a very broad, definition and the rights espoused under that particular article. But having seen how demonstrations are done in Kenya, it's very important that we go ahead and regulate and provide, legislation to provide the parameters within which people can demonstrate. And Kenya will not be the first country to do this. It's done globally, where if you look at other jurisdictions, they provide parameters of where you can demonstrate, which buildings you can never, approach if you have demonstrations, the timings in terms of demonstrations, the period within which you can demonstrate. So it's very important, especially now that we know that many times our demonstrations turn violent. It's important to regulate so that on the side of the citizens, they understand that these are my responsibilities as far as my right to demonstrate is.
When you say that, when you say that the places you shouldn't not approach, examples?
I think if you look at it globally, a place like Parliament, a place like the judiciary, a place like State House, if you look at international best practices, those are buildings that are considered of national security, and citizens are not allowed to protest around those areas. But this is a conversation that we can have as Kenya, because we are developing legislation that is context specific to Kenya, and we can agree on where should people demonstrate and which buildings are so important that we cannot allow demonstrators, especially where we are not very clear that a demonstration may turn violent. We need to define the parameters of where demonstrators need to be and where they should not be allowed to go to. But ideally, this is a right that should not be curtailed. So the whole essence of providing parameters is never to curtail this particular right,
all right,
but to provide clear parameters of where citizens, but also the state organs need to, converge in terms of implementation of this particular right.
I want to invite us to give closing thoughts, and I want us to reflect in these closing thoughts. Tell us, 16 years down the line, there must be a gap that still needs to be met from constitutional commissions and independent officers. What must be done to meet this gap? I look at the glass 3/4 full, 75%. However, 25% must be met. What is it that must be done? And if it's someone who's here who needs to be told you need to stop this for us to meet the 25%, let us do so openly, respectfully, and honestly. Let me start with the Commission on Administrative Justice.
Thank you very much. First of all, in terms of plowing back, I think we need to understand that nature hates a vacuum. So as a constitutional commissioner, you must occupy that space so that you don't allow anybody to come and take that space. That's the first starting point. The gap we are talking about here is in terms of funding. There can never be independence if we don't have enough money to do this. And if we are able to give a certain percentage of the revenue to the counties, I think it is important that we also give a certain percentage of that revenue to constitutional commissions. And we have CRA here who will now distribute that percentage to various constitutional commissions based on their mandate. As I wind up, and this is what I undertake to the public, Kicc under our watch is simple. We say what we mean, and we mean what we say.
Okay.
And that is what we will give to the people of Kenya.
All right.
If there's anything that we need to investigate, we will investigate it. If there's something that we need to do to improve the lived experience for the people of Kenya, we will be able to do it firmly, fairly, and without fear. Again, we will also give you your right of Article 47, which means we will hear you before we take any action. We will make sure that we use the diplomatic means that are provided for in our Act, like mediation, arbitration, but where you are obstinate and you're not doing what you need to do, then if it calls for summoning and fining, we will not be afraid to do so.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to the SRC. Any gap that needs to be filled, what needs to be done for that gap to be filled, and if there is any party, be it here or watching us from home, that needs to act on something for these gaps to be filled, please name them, respectfully so.
I think we are all agreed, I think in my view, that there are actually two gaps. One is we need to exercise this issue of independence very responsibly. Because you cannot be independent there as CCIOs and the people you serve are on this side. I think we need to manage that better so that we provide better service to the country. That's my honest opinion. Without the country feeling that now your independence has been compromised. The second...
Do you want to cite any CCIO that you are describing this particular situation? We are being honest with each other.
In the interest of time, let me go to the second one. Which is for CCIOs to function effectively, I think we need to find a way of resourcing them better than we are doing at the moment.
All right. All right, Bishop Oginde.
Thank you very much. One is the enforcement of Chapter 6 issues. You did mention, for example, EACC gives this list to IEBC.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that IEBC ignores. Our constitutional framework provides that unless you have exhausted the whole judicial process, even if you have a case, you cannot be barred from seeking an elective office. That in itself undermines the very values that we talk about. In our neighboring country, Tanzania, it is exactly the opposite. If you have been convicted of any corruption case, you stand guilty as you appeal. In our case, you are still innocent even after you have conviction. So we need to look at, if we are serious about enforcing the values that are given to us under Chapter 6, how do we legislate that so that those people who violate this ethical conduct that is provided for us are actually kept out? In the same line, we find, for example, we are investigating an individual. Like I said, the most difficult people to investigate are people who are in office. And we recommend that this person should step aside as the investigations are going on. In many cases, they are reinstalled in the office, and it becomes very difficult to do any investigations, to get documents, to get people to witness, rather to testify according to what is required.
All right.
The other area is the pace of prosecution. the process from investigation all the way to conviction, if there is, can take a very long period of time. That is because of the many stages that this has to go through. It is important that we look at that whole process. There are areas that we could reduce the amount of time that is required or the number of steps that one needs to go through before a prosecution takes place.
All right, at that particular point, allow me to interject because it reminds me, and very briefly, of this incessant complaint that has been coming from the EACC about prosecution. In fact, you are on record asking members of parliament here to grant the EACC, and I think it also goes by extension to also the police prosecutorial powers. You have done that because we have seen blame being shifted from EACC to DPP and eventually to the judiciary. Now that today we are here with the political goodwill of the country, is this something that the EACC is still actively pursuing? And what are the possibilities of this happening?
Thank you very much. The Constitution provides that Parliament can provide legislation that gives prosecutorial powers to other entity other than the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. And so it is not something that we are asking outside of the law. But this would shorten that process because, for example, the civic cases that we investigate, we take them directly to court. And we find that, for example, asset recovery, EACC right now is recognized globally as very successful in matters of asset recovery. In Africa, there are many nations that are coming to benchmark with us because of that. So it is a matter of efficiency that would help us to get these cases out of the way faster. But I hasten to add that in recent past, in fact, just a few weeks ago, we have had a very robust conversation with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and we have come up with a framework through which we hope we can work together towards ensuring that things move faster. But ultimately, I believe that would be a very helpful move.
Asante sana. Clarice, less than 30 seconds, closing remarks, gap, and what needs to be done.
For me, three things. Number one, if you look at the current context in Kenya, we've over-focused on rights without looking at corresponding responsibilities. So for me, that's one message that I would want to pass. That Article 3.1 of the Constitution emphasizes that we have rights, but we also have responsibilities. And I think when we start recognizing that rights come with responsibilities, I think we may be able to achieve, get to at least 80% of implementation of the Constitution.
I
think the second thing for me, and was alluded to by the Ombudsman, is about funding to constitutional commissions. Probably it's about time we thought about ring-fencing funding to constitutional commissions, similar to what we have with other arms of government. Then lastly, just to mention that constitutional commissions are the bridge between the citizenry and the government and the state. And we should not be seen as enemies of either of the two. We must be seen as that bridge that brings the two together towards finding sustainable solutions to the issues that affect us as a country.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Nancy, the reason I've given you the last opportunity is because, one, you're the chair of the caucus for chairpersons of constitutional commissions and independent officers, but I also want you to turn the mirror inwards and tell us, what have these commissions done or failed to do that have led us to where we are today? It surely cannot be all external pressure. Internally, what needs to be done?
Thank you. And I'll respond to that in the context of the gaps. The thread of your questioning has been on what needs to be done, what is remaining, and this speaks directly to the citizens. It is important that we really do self-reflection because the Constitution established an accountability architecture that is designed as an ecosystem, that whether you are this arm of government, whether it's the executive, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's parliament, whether it's the two arms of government at county level, the county assemblies and the county executives, and the constitution commissions and independent offices, we all have a role to play in the accountability architecture.